This realm was dominated solely by women. Approximately 300 years prior, as the new demon emerged, a woman proclaimed to her followers that men must submit to women. Moreover, they were to kneel and revere them. From that moment, the world's rules began to shift. In a cell, a man sat shackled, his eyes blindfolded. A girl laughed, finding his predicament amusing as he appeared anxious. She exploited his vulnerability, chuckling at his desperate reactions. Yet, he was powerless to change his fate. This was his punishment. After all, he had challenged his mistress and attempted to flee, landing him in this dire situation. Such defiance was a grave offense, and as a male, he deserved to be punished. Thus, she brandished a large weapon resembling scissors, intent on severing his manhood. He thrashed in panic, but she merely laughed, asking if he was prepared for what was to come. The ordeal unfolded, and the man screamed, eliciting more laughter from the girl who reveled in the spectacle. This was nearly her 100th time doing this. She always found joy in witnessing such scenes. Time shifted to Yggdrasil's nursing unit, where an elderly man named Cheeser felt pain in his hips due to the dreadful weather, soon approached by another. It was Miguel, a staff member in that unit, though Cheeser was puzzled about his presence. Miguel mentioned it was the 6th time he had been asked the same question. He inquired why Cheeser continued to wander in such terrible weather. It was too perilous. He should return to his room and rest instead of lingering. Jazer asked if something was happening with Miguel. After complaining about being called the wrong name, he pointed out the situation. Apparently, they were recruiting slaves, and the group possessed significant power. They were indifferent to being pushed to their limits. This was the new existence under female dominance. It was the decree of the latest demon lord. They had no choice but to comply. Miguel sighed. This conversation had already occurred 6 times, but it was unavoidable. Being born male meant inevitably becoming a failure in life, subject to women's whims. Men and women were at odds. It was a sad sight. Miguel remarked that he had heard tales of a time when they were meant to coexist peacefully. If Jesus were still around, this world would likely be vastly different. Suddenly, a massive lightning bolt struck the sky, causing Jeezer to widen his eyes and shove Miguel aside. The thunder hit the exact spot where the old man had been. Miguel stood stunned, unable to comprehend what had just occurred, yet worried about the old man. He rushed to check on him, anxious because the man had shielded him from a potentially worse fate. Relieved, Miguel found Jesus, feeling reassured after the chaos, but the old man laughed, claiming everything was literally shocking. However, the lightning was merely a tickle compared to what he had endured before. What was once an old man had transformed back into a young man. Miguel was baffled by this cool stranger who had appeared, while Jeezer felt his perspective had somehow shifted upward, even as Miguel stood frozen in disbelief. When offered a mirror to see his new form, Jigster screamed at the sight of his reflection, astonished by the handsome man he had become. Somehow, he had regained his youth. Miguel asked if he was truly Jeezer and inquired about his feelings. Jizar responded that he felt better than ever, eager to start walking immediately, but Migo halted him. After all, they were perched atop a tree, and that lunatic intended to just walk off, risking a fall from such a height. They could be endangering their lives, but Jeezer insisted that now that he was young again, he would be fine. Migo was concerned, as Jeezer seemed to be overestimating his physical condition. Besides, there was nowhere to walk from that height, but Jesus countered that he was mistaken. The current demon lord was the one in the wrong. Men and women should be treated equally, not be at odds. That was why Jesus leapt from the tree to teach those war veterans a lesson, leaving Miguel in shock as he watched him jump toward the recruitment area. This was Jesus Aligarchia, a man who united the world and the demons, the demon lord from 2 generations past. Seeing him leap from that height, even Miguel was astonished by his physical resilience, but ultimately he did injure his legs. Still, Jizar made his way toward the city near Adra's Ultarago, relieved to be out after such a long time. As he walked through the streets, he reminisced about how, in the past, the area was filled with wooden structures and nature. This city had undergone significant changes recently. Now, Jesus observed countless women strolling through the streets. Not that he minded, but Jesus wondered if it was due to men being absent from this reality. Consequently, women felt liberated to wear whatever they desired in public. This was quite bold, even for Jesus, who observed from a distance. It was almost a true paradise for him. until he continued walking and encountered a wounded man crawling on all fours. That made him reconsider his earlier words. It appeared to be hell masquerading as paradise. It didn't take long for the women to notice as they walked by. The women suggested gathering to report everything to their lady cloth, but Jezer continued walking casually. He assumed the Kermit demon lord was inside the castle and recalled its location from his past. It had been centuries since then, and Jezer was unaware of how the situation had escalated since the days of the demon lord's army. Such matters ultimately didn't affect the protagonist. Regardless, he knew there had to be a path near Rhodeus. As he walked, Jesus approached a girl asking for permission to gather information and even offered to have tea along the way. But she abruptly shoved him away upon realizing he was a man and fled, leaving Jesus sighing at her harsh rejection. Suddenly, a pair of handcuffs clamped around his wrists, and Jezer was bewildered by their sudden appearance. When he realized it, he saw that the ones who had restrained him were two men in peculiar masks, the same ones who had been nearby earlier. A woman approached, laughing upon spotting a man wandering the streets. He would be her grand milestone, the 100th on her list. The woman laughed, instructing the men to escort Jezer to the castle, while he thought he had stumbled into something bizarre. Thus, he was thrown into a room, and Jesus complained about how poorly they treated an old man like him. The girl chuckled, clearly a skilled deceiver, to claim age with such a youthful look. Jesus insisted he was truthful and inquired about her identity. She introduced herself as Clot Laneige, a law enforcer. Yet she was taken aback to see a man like him wandering those streets. Cloak thought it would be problematic if the army discovered Jesus. He had willingly been captured, leading him to this place. The others questioned how he could exist without a mistress. They informed Jezer that male slaves were always required to have their mistresses accompany them outside. That was the rule. Jezer laughed, stating he was an outsider, and asked them to elaborate on the current situation. Jesus recounted that long ago, men and women were seen as equals despite their differences. Something had changed, and he was curious about the cause. She leaned closer, saying she was kind and would explain what he needed to understand. Around 300 years prior, a twin demon had overthrown the previous demon lord and claimed the throne in this new realm. The new demon lord was named Mia Aligarsha. Jesus was stunned. She shared his last name. Meanwhile, Kolak continued, explaining that the new demon lord decreed all males must submit to females, kneeling before them, which cursed men by stripping them of their magical abilities. All men lost their power in the presence of women. Female leaders replaced men in every organization, reducing them to slaves. Chloe asked if her explanation was clear, and Jesus nodded. Realizing he needed to gather as much intel as possible, he thought he might dominate that enforcer now. To his surprise, it was Chloe who stepped forward first. She laughed, eager to begin the task immediately. Time for fun was over. Jesus' defiant gaze remained steady despite the impending confrontation. Making a man like him submit was one of her favorite challenges, and Chloe produced her large scissors. Jezer was taken aback by the sudden appearance of the scissors, and Chloe laughed, claiming it was her unique magic. These scissors also served as weapons against those who defied the demon lord, frightening Jezer with their bizarre nature. Regardless, Chloe insisted they should get moving. The protagonist sighed, realizing she had quite the peculiar hobby. Unfortunately, Jesus was not fond of pain and refused. The clothes were caught off guard as the protagonist shattered his own shackles. She laughed, impressed by his strength. She liked that type and rushed at him to engage. But Jezer quickly defended against her strike. It had been a while since he fought, and he felt a bit rusty. This attack should have been trivial, but Chloe surprised him by revealing a second pair of scissors. Before she could use them, they unexpectedly split in two. Chloe was bewildered, not grasping what had just occurred. She laughed, realizing she had underestimated him. This infuriated her, especially after experiencing such humiliation. Suddenly, she burst into laughter. It was the first time she had witnessed something like that. She decided to make him submit another way. She commanded her slaves to restrain the protagonist. Thus, Jesus was pinned down. Chloe remarked that even if he broke her weapon, he couldn't overcome the physical strength of her men. With his arms bound, she contemplated her next move. But Jezer laughed, acknowledging her strength but deeming it foolish to approach him. With a snap of his fingers, the protagonist caused the slaves to collapse without lifting a finger. He smiled, glad he had trained after centuries. Chloe was stunned, watching in confusion. Jezer could see the question in her eyes. Noticing her bewilderment, Jesus stepped closer, explaining that he had no magical power at birth. To compensate, he trained his body and mastered a specific martial art. He intended to let her experience it firsthand. As he pinned Chloe against the wall, she froze, uncertain of his intentions. Suddenly, she realized he was attempting to extract a bone from her. This was Jesus' martial art, bone extraction. He revealed he had removed a small bone known as the bone of ecstasy. This left the agent standing still, utterly confused. Then she began to writhe in agony, feeling as if her body was on fire. A strange sensation tickled inside her, causing Jesus to laugh at the sight. Something was burning, and Chloe couldn't control it. She couldn't reach the spot through her clothing. Before she realized it, Chloe was drenched in a way she never anticipated. Yet despite that, it felt oddly pleasurable. Watching her in that state of madness, Jesus could only chuckle at Chloe's humiliation before a man. The Alakarcia style included bone extraction as a legendary martial art, capable of extracting the so-called bone of love from 48 different body parts without harming the target. When a man fell for a woman but couldn't showcase his true abilities, there was a saying, "Taking your bone for your charm." This was the origin of that potent technique. Jesus figured it must have been overwhelming for someone like her, who had lived a life of purity. Quill lay on the ground, grumbling that this was unacceptable. She couldn't be outdone by a man. Out of nowhere, the slaves on the ground seized Chloe, catching her off guard as her clothes ripped. She couldn't grasp the meaning behind their actions. Something felt off. Chloe commanded them to cease, asserting her status as their mistress. But the slaves overpowered her. You can fight all you want. She couldn't budge a single muscle, paralyzed by fear. Pressed into the ground, the agent felt humiliated, powerless to intervene. Jesus watched, laughing because, as he anticipated, this tactic failed against beastmen. Their feelings were stronger than love, and noticing their response, Chloe began to call for help. Finally, the slaves relented, with Jesus declaring he would toy with them for a while. The protagonist barely evaded the strike, maintaining distance as he sensed they were eager for a fight. They seemed aware that getting too close to Yeezer would cost them dearly. At least they were clever slaves, but it still wasn't enough to escape the protagonist's might. This was due to his considerable strength. With a swift motion, he took down both slaves. They hit the ground instantly. In that moment, he snatched 2 bones from their bodies, chuckling at their disastrous state. Jesus extracted the bone of eruption and claimed the bone of love, a unique one that had effects when shattered. What would follow was total chaos. The bone of eruption caused them to explode from within until nothing was left. This release was likened to a whale's explosion. After defeating them, Jizar laughed, believing this was the rightful treatment for males, or at least that's what Chloe thought. But they needn't worry. They wouldn't die from it, just as the agent approached him. She inquired about the protagonist's name, and he introduced himself as Jesus, noticing her drawing closer. The agent leaned in and kissed him. This was something Jesus anticipated, as the bones of love didn't merely weaken their target. They also triggered a massive internal explosion that a woman like Chloe had likely never felt before. Above all, she would fall for the one who extracted her bone, and now Chloe was asking him to be her master. In response, Jesus laughed, knowing that once he took her bone, she would be his possession. He felt a twinge of discomfort as he was essentially controlling her. However, the bones of love would regenerate after a night, so he simply indicated that when she regained her senses, she shouldn't hit him for it. Until then, he would make good use of the agent. When Chloe suddenly stared at the protagonist in disbelief, his hair had turned white. Jesus realized this change when he caught his reflection, suspecting it was the effect of rejuvenation. He needed to act quickly, as the world was in turmoil and change was necessary. No one should be superior to another. Men and women had to coexist. She was meant to teach these people a lesson. Thus, racing against time, he instructed Chloe to lead him to the Demon Lord. To his surprise, she stammered and refused. She revealed that something had happened to the Demon Lord. She had been moved. Jesus grew curious about her new location instead of being there. That was how they both stepped outside. Jesus felt relieved. It seemed much more pleasant. Kolo explained that the Demon Lord Mia used to reside there, but a few years back, she had gone to the kingdom of Auseracia. This shocked the protagonist, as it was literally on the opposite side of the continent, too far away. The kingdom of Auserace was a remote area on the far side of the Galpi continent, surrounded by icebergs, a land inhabited by high-level monsters. Thus, Jesus wondered why the demon lord had chosen such a place, and the agent apologized for her inability to assist. She, the agent, wished to become Jesus' personal guard and seemed genuinely committed as she donned that armband. Now Chloe only desired to obey her new master's commands. She also sought appropriate punishments, but Jizar kept her at bay with that rope. The agent acted strangely, and he had no interest in her. Instead, Jizar focused on the kingdom of Osiracia, now farther away than ever. Still, it wouldn't pose a significant issue for him, because Jizar had a remarkably skilled servant. With fresh blood and skin as dark as coal, his partner had once run 10,000 miles in a single day. Klabi was curious about this partner, prompting Jizar to call for Morpheus, the demon. Despite snapping his fingers, nothing happened, leaving Jesus standing there like a fool. He snapped again and again, but it was odd. The demon didn't appear. Under normal circumstances, the demon would have shown up immediately, and the agent quickly stepped forward to apologize. But according to that world's Wikipedia, the demon he mentioned had perished nearly 200 years ago. Jesus screamed in disbelief. He couldn't fathom that the demon had died long before him, despite waiting so long. Meanwhile, the agent questioned how he could possibly know about a heroic demon from such a distant past. Even if it were still alive, it was a creature that couldn't have been an ordinary civilian, and Jesus hesitated to find an answer. At last, the main character pondered how tricky it would be to admit he was once a demon lord and had just lied. He remarked that he hadn't meant to let that slip, causing the agent to chuckle, fully convinced. It was still astonishing that she had suddenly taken him at his word. She collapsed right there on the ground. Callow rushed over, concerned, asking what was wrong, and he complained about his aching back. He requested to lie down for a moment. Her excitement grew as they could find a safe spot. Chloe proposed heading to a nearby inn. While there, they could explore various activities. However, Jesus soon realized her thoughts were far from ordinary. This would be her first experience. Though Chloe lacked experience, she believed she had enough to compensate. She aimed to impress Jesus, but her ideas fell short. She even worried she might accidentally bite him. As she envisioned all this, excitement surged within her at the thought of trying new things. But then, to her surprise, an odd old man appeared. Jesus was taken aback as he transformed back into an elder. Next to him, the agent anxiously searched for Jizar, while he began to wonder if his time was truly running out. It was clear this was simply how nature operated, yet he pondered how to reach the demon lord now. He figured he should start at the bazaar to find the creature. But he couldn't recall where to go. Despite wanting to ask Chloe for assistance, she had dashed off and vanished from view. With that, he resolved to wander around in search. But suddenly, a girl yelled at him to watch out as a carriage barreled down the street. In an instant, she saved him, yanking him to safety and checking if he was all right. Crossing the main road alone was too risky, so she helped him to the safe side. Jizar felt grateful that kindness still existed in this world. Yet, he also felt a wave of nostalgia. Being carried was oddly comforting, and once she set him down, she advised him to be more cautious. He thanked her, and she replied it was no trouble. It was her duty. The girl hailed from a noble family, and it was part of her responsibilities. She waved goodbye, mentioning she had other matters to attend to. Jesus thought she was a lovely girl, and then he heard a bell ringing in the distance. Apparently, an auction was underway with bids climbing to 82 gold coins. The item for sale, a nightmare. G0 approached to see what was happening. The girl who had rescued the protagonist was also present, and the auctioneer soon made a new announcement. Jizar was utterly stunned as he watched the girl who had aided him become the next item for auction. The bidding began at 500 gold, and a new auction was about to commence right before his eyes. He had merely come to see what was going on. The protagonist was taken aback by the girl who had saved him. She introduced herself to everyone as a noble, declaring her starting price was 500 gold. To her dismay, the auctioneer changed the starting price to silver, infuriating her at how undervalued she was. The user was still grappling with the fact that she was being treated like an object when he sensed a shift in the crowd. The atmosphere seemed to change abruptly. He wondered why no one was interested in the girl. Despite her low price, she was practically pleading to be purchased. On stage, she showcased her talents, claiming she could sing and dance, repeatedly emphasizing her noble heritage. Moreover, she was someone who didn't require much food, making her easy to maintain. Still, no one spoke up, and the auctioneer waved her hand, asking if they should sell her or grill her. as she seemed to have no real value. With the tension rising, the girl attempted to negotiate further, asserting that she was also quite cute and curvy. Despite her efforts to impress the crowd, no one was responding. So Jesus stepped forward, inquiring why this was happening, and the reply was that clarity would come soon. Suddenly, the girl recalled that she needed to transform. She awkwardly shrank inside her own clothes. Jesus was baffled, watching as she tucked her limbs inside her garments like an animal. That was when a massive creature appeared, sending everyone fleeing, but the protagonist stood frozen. In that moment, Jesus realized he had regained his youth, and the creature's face was striking. It had black fur and a fluffy form. There was no doubt about its true identity. The protagonist recognized the colossal beast as his soulmate, Morpheus, though it seemed preoccupied. Morpheus kept chattering about how they could travel and relax on his fluffy body, but he was too hungry to care about being auctioned. He began munching on a nearby tent, causing everyone to scatter before they were accidentally devoured. Morpheus ignored the shouts telling him to stop destroying the tent, continuing to eat until nothing was left. He felt satisfied because it was delicious. Before he knew it, he was alone again. Once again, he lost control and created chaos. Looking back, he saw the auctioneer fuming, even striking Morpheus, calling him a worthless beast. He had wrecked the entire stage, leaving the woman furious as she demanded to know how he planned to rectify the situation. After enduring humiliation, the creature transformed back into the girl who was still being struck by the auctioneer. The auctioneer displayed the enormous bill left after the chaos. After all, she truly was useless. No one wanted to buy her, and on top of that, she consumed 100 times more than any other item. Fury consumed her as she readied to end the girl's life with a lethal strike. She thought it might be wiser to sell her as meat instead. The girl froze, startled. Memories flooded back. She was the youngest of 3 siblings. Her mother often recounted tales of the former demon lord, detailing events from long ago. Her grandfather had served this demon lord, a remarkable ruler and a truly admirable figure. The girl cherished those stories, dreaming of one day becoming a demon lord's companion. Even after being abducted and left to fend for herself, through rain and hunger, and despite being treated like dirt for her shortcomings, she persevered. Her dream and noble lineage kept her going. Yet it felt like her life was about to end, and all she could do was weep for the chance to meet the human lord. The auctioneer lunged at the girl. She laughed, thinking at least the girl could serve as food for the slaves, finally proving useful. To her astonishment, a biscuit soared through the air and landed in her mouth. Confused, she realized someone had intervened. It was Jesus, who had just saved her, suggesting she shouldn't get so worked up over something so minor. It would only ruin her pretty face. She should eat and unwind. The auctioneer demanded to know who this man was, the one who had saved the girl. Jesus chuckled, claiming he was just a passing No Jake, amused by his own good looks. No, Jake referred to a group whose sentences ended with ja or noja. Known as Aikmen or handsome men, they spoke like wise elders and were adored in the past. Interestingly, the most famous theory about Aikmen stemmed from a legendary martial artist named Akeman, who ended his sentences with aru, a detail lost to time, though his beauty and fame as one of the 7 great treasures were well remembered. The auctioneer's anger flared. A mere man was obstructing her. The protagonist laughed, asking if she didn't enjoy the rice cracker he had bought from the nearby store. To Jesus, it was delicious. It even rejuvenated his youth unexpectedly, bringing him joy. The girl stared at the protagonist, bewildered, questioning who he was and why he made her feel so at ease. But the auctioneer's rage was far from quelled. She was in a foul mood. Not only was she caught in this chaos, but one of her slaves had also managed to escape. Her fury was uncontainable, threatening to turn everything to ash, and her power began to seep out. The girl clung to Jesus in terror, insisting it wasn't her fault the slave had fled. The protagonist just laughed. She was undeniably furious. Realizing the impending danger, the girl warned Jesus that he was a man, and he should take the chance to flee. Her master was a fire mage, and her power intensified with her anger. If he didn't escape now, he would be grilled alongside her. She appreciated Jesus' attempt to save her, but he stood no chance against her master. So she positioned herself in front of the protagonist, pleading for him to run. Facing her master, she apologized, admitting it was her fault for always overeating, but she begged for Jesus' life to be spared. In a frenzy, she continued to plead for forgiveness, claiming she always consumed the fruit men and other products. Calmly, Jeezer placed a hand on her shoulder and stepped past her, assuring her not to worry. He was strong enough to defeat her master without harming her. The master unleashed a torrent of flames at the protagonist. He focused his gaze, assessing where her bones were. To his surprise, all of the woman's bones were pitch black, as if she were saturated to the core. Moreover, Jeezer sensed the hatred within her magic, baffled by its existence. Noticing his contemplation, the girl explained that her master had once been kind, but her fury grew with her power. Jeezer realized that men weren't the only ones cursed by the demon lord. She had drained men's magic while empowering women, allowing their magic to exceed its limits. If this was the demon lord's resolution, Jeezer could only think of one solution. The master's attack surged toward him, and the slave girl screamed for Jeezer as flames engulfed him. The woman taunted him, saying he should perish already since he was merely dodging. To her astonishment, Jeezer hadn't dodged. He blocked the flames with his bare hand. Seizing the moment of her surprise, the protagonist charged at her, swiftly extracting a bone using his martial arts. He resolved to remove each bone one by one until he could take them all. Now Jeezer saw the opportunity to extract one of the 48 love bones. This was the wise bone within her, causing her to collapse to her knees. Beside her, the slave girl was bewildered, unsure of what had transpired. Her master trembled, feeling something unusual within her. It seemed her body was responding to something unseen. That was when she realized her entire body was at peak sensitivity. Jeezer chuckled. Just one bone had been sufficient for that. If he broke it, she would enter wise mode. That was precisely what occurred, as even the slave girl was confused when her master suddenly stood and began conversing normally with the protagonist. It was so abrupt that it felt as if the fight had never occurred, and then the auctioneer declared her desire to rid herself of the girl. There were no other buyers at that moment. However, considering her investment losses, it would be best to recoup her expenses. She wanted to at least recover her losses to avoid a deficit, so she quoted the final price to the girl. The girl gasped in shock. It was far too much for her to afford alone. 82 gold was excessive. Regardless, the master crossed out the amount, stating that as long as Jeezer promised to care for her, she could offer a special discount. Thus, instead of the original price, she set it at 10 gold. This left the slave girl immensely relieved and grateful for her kindness. The master acknowledged that while profit was crucial for a merchant, the happiness of her merchandise mattered even more. As the girls wept in relief, Jeezer observed, realizing this must have been the auctioneer's true nature. With that in mind, Jeezer declared there was no need for a discount. He would pay the full price. The girl was astonished by his generosity. Then they watched as Jeezer rummaged through his clothes for money. That was when he realized he had completely forgotten he arrived with empty pockets. He had jumped down from the tree without a second thought. Plus, he had stuffed his pockets with rice crackers earlier, and now he realized he would need to offer something else. Ultimately, he traded his kimono for the girl, as it was the only thing left he could use. Not long after, Chloe pressed on with her investigation, soon realizing the auction's chaos had finally subsided. Still pondering Jesus' whereabouts, she suddenly heard his voice and joyfully turned to see him. Yet Jesus was practically exposing himself to everyone, prompting the agent to scream, demanding clarity on the situation. This was how the protagonist found himself in such a chaotic mess, revealing himself to onlookers. Just as Chloe spotted the protagonist, she was met with a shocking scene that left her far from pleased. She yelled out, furious that Jesus was showing off as it all belonged to her, causing a huge uproar. Morpheus rushed into Jesus' embrace, and they attempted to defuse the situation, insisting she must have misunderstood. Eventually, they calmed the agent down and had others start fixing the mess that had been made. Claude listened intently as Jesus explained how he had purchased the girl, trading his clothes instead of cash, since he had none. She grumbled that he should have asked for help first, though she hesitated to do so. The auctioneer claimed those were high-quality items, but merchants rarely cared enough to buy them, leaving her feeling unworthy to refuse. Jesus admitted he felt a bit embarrassed, too. In that moment, they realized they hadn't properly introduced themselves. Jeezer and Chloe exchanged their names. The auctioneer introduced herself as Flame, a merchant, expressing her honor in meeting them, especially Chloe, known for her infamous reputation of severing men's parts, something that unnerved Jeezer. Morpheus introduced himself as Yeezy Zimorpheus, prompting Cloak to question the meaning behind that. Cloak then asked if Jezer couldn't just access the demon bank for money, but he had no idea what that was. She clarified that if he registered his magical abilities with the bank, they could offer him services anytime. Even those with minimal magic could utilize it. However, Jezer had never encountered anything like that. He always relied on others for his finances, having no magical powers himself. After all, the protagonist was born without any magical abilities. This shocked Claude, who had always used cash. They lived in a time when physical money was becoming obsolete, as most people entrusted it to banks. When Jezer recalled how merchants hesitated to help him buy rice crackers, it was astonishing that someone still used regular money for transactions, yet Jezer insisted on using cash. Before Caleb could assist him, Jesus said it was fine. If he lacked money, he would just earn it himself. This included offering certain services. The girls were left speechless, as that usually hinted at a very different kind of practical training. Jezer could offer services to teach girls new to the subject, providing affection and training to clients. This left Cloak and Flame completely frozen, while Morpheus remained oblivious, taking it as something unrelated. Regardless, Jesus clarified that these services were actually healthy food deliveries, like salads. While wandering the city, the protagonist noticed that home deliveries were quite trendy. Running a business like that could lead to great success in this woman-dominated world. At that moment, Morpheus caught their attention, eager to eat and cook, ready to borrow ingredients from the kitchen. Morpheus began cooking and returned shortly after, leaving Chloe surprised by how delicious the food looked. She felt a sense of pride seeing him impress them. It was possible to create meals that nourished both body and mind. Flay noted how quickly Morpheus could whip up such dishes, and Jezer was equally impressed. At that point, the protagonist asked Flame for some time to gather the money, to which she agreed, as long as he eventually paid. But it wouldn't be easy, marking the start of their limited edition healthy delivery service. Chloe began assisting by putting up advertisements around the city, impressing Jezer with the advanced technology of the era. He thanked Chloe for her help, and she was thrilled to assist her master. They divided tasks to continue the deliveries, with the user covering his face to avoid immediate recognition as a man. Morpheus visited a customer to deliver a healthy meal, and the client was overjoyed, having been starving. However, she was nearly frightened as Morpheus drooled from hunger, almost wanting to devour the customer's meal. Yet the group pressed on with their deliveries until the sun began to set. Jezer was amazed at how quickly the deliveries gained popularity. The day had been incredibly hectic, even if some complained that the food was delicious but covered in Morpheus's drool. The protagonist patted Morpheus on the head, apologizing for her temptation towards the food. He reassured her it was fine since she had worked hard to cook, so she shouldn't feel bad. Jezer felt particularly satisfied, while the girls just hoped he hadn't done anything inappropriate with the customers during their deliveries. Still, making money appeared challenging. After seeing the production costs, he realized the situation was more complex. Jesus wondered how long it would take to reach his goal. A little later, Morpheus and Chloe went out for another delivery, but the resident inside the house didn't respond. Worried the person might have left, the agent tried to keep Morpheus quiet, even though she was hungry again. Suddenly, they sensed someone was inside the house, so they approached to enter, but Morpheus pointed in shock. An elderly woman lay collapsed on the floor, and they rushed over, filled with concern. The truth was, Chloe didn't like Morpheus. She always stayed close to Jezer, and even he had taken care of her, crafting new clothes so she wouldn't worry. Clove had only followed the girl, fearing she might cause trouble again. However, Morpheus dashed over to assist the elderly woman who had fainted and was struggling to breathe. The agent began making a call for help, but Chloe gasped in surprise when she heard something. Morpheus asked what was happening, and Chloe inquired if she had heard about a great light that appeared that morning after the thunder. Apparently, the damage had spread, and there were too few people available for treatment. Because of that, no one would be coming to help, leaving Morpheus shocked that no one would assist the woman. Chloe never took her eyes off people in distress, even if she wanted to provide first aid. But all she could do was use magical tools that caused pain, so she wasn't skilled in that area. She pondered what to do, and Morpheus was the first to suggest they needed to get to the hospital immediately. However, they would have to cross the entire forest to reach it. Judging by the elderly woman's condition, she might only have 30 minutes left if they were lucky. Even if they could conjure a carriage or summon a magical beast, the trip would still take at least 90 minutes. If only they could speed things up. Morpheus suddenly got it. The forest stretched 50 kilometers ahead, and they needed to traverse it in under 30 minutes. In that moment, she shifted into her alternate form, and they took off at breakneck speed. Even Chloe was taken aback by her swiftness. She sprinted with astonishing speed. Not only was she a fantastic cook, but she was also an exceptional runner. Outpacing dragons and other creatures, Morpheus was the fastest thing Chloe had ever witnessed. The agent figured they might just make it through the forest in time to save the woman. Abruptly, Morpheus came to a stop. Chloe inquired about her sudden halt, noticing a massive fissure blocking their path. Such a thing shouldn't exist in the forest, so they had to tread carefully to avoid worsening the situation. When Morpheus remained still, Chloe realized her fear of heights was holding her back. Nearby, the elderly woman coughed, and Chloe thought they couldn't afford to detour. There was no bridge in sight to cross. That's when Chloe had a brainstorm. She turned to Morpheus, suggesting they could fell some trees, but Morpheus was confused. The trees weren't substantial enough to form a proper bridge, yet Chloe insisted they could create one together, even if she didn't fully grasp it. Morpheus resolved to do her part, and they set their plan into motion. As she chopped down trees, Chloe used her rope to bind the pieces together. They fashioned something to help them cross. She revealed this was one of her skills with ropes. That was a bit unnerving for Morpheus. With considerable effort, they crossed the makeshift bridge, and soon after, the girls managed to save the woman's life. They explained their struggles, hoping she would recover. The woman mentioned she had ordered a healthy meal, which turned out to be a wise choice. It was that meal that had saved her life. Though it was unfortunate that the chaos had ruined the food, Morpheus apologized for the outcome, and Chloe promised to prepare another meal for her. However, the woman ate the food anyway, assuring them it was delicious and agreeing it was smart to order from them. If she remembered correctly, their service was only available occasionally, so she asked why. Covering Morpheus's mouth just as she mentioned her master wanted to buy her, Chloe quickly provided a different explanation. She clarified they were doing this for money. They would be thrilled if she ordered again. The woman inquired how much they needed, and judging by their anxious expressions, it seemed substantial. If that was the case, she offered them a token of gratitude as a small bonus, and Chloe immediately began expressing her thanks. They were utterly stunned when the extra amount turned out to be 100 gold coins. They questioned whether she had genuinely not overpaid, as it was an excessive amount for a bonus. The woman chuckled, stating they had saved her life, so they should accept both her goodwill and the money. With that, they thanked her and bid farewell, leaving the woman alone in the hospital, reflecting on something. She had heard he had entered a mental health facility. Yet, she hadn't anticipated him being alive. Meanwhile, back with Jeezer, a different situation was unfolding. He was in a frenzy as the terminal kept ringing, overwhelmed by the influx of orders. Clon Morpheus had returned, yet he had never cooked before and was truly struggling. When he sought Flame's assistance, she replied that she had never cooked either and wanted no part in it. Both were grappling with the overwhelming orders alone. At another point, Chloe asked the protagonist why he wanted to buy Morpheus. She had heard a tale that Morpheus was a descendant of a demon hero, but she found it too absurd. If Jeezer truly needed someone like her, Chloe claimed she could handle it herself. But the protagonist cut her off, clarifying it wasn't solely about Morpheus's heritage. He needed Morpheus because she was a kind-hearted soul, and now the agent understood. After all, they had worked hard to save the elderly woman's life. Back at home, Club heard voices coming from inside. It was Jeezer and Flame. Something odd was occurring. With that, the agent burst into the room, shouting that enough was enough, until she saw what was actually happening. Hazar was inappropriately touching the other girl. Flame commanded him to stop, and he apologized, showing no remorse for his actions. Chloe was stunned. What should have been a simple misunderstanding turned out to be entirely true. He laughed as he apologized, claiming he had been cleaning when he accidentally fell, but he quickly shifted the topic. He didn't reveal what they had been preparing until now, as he had just become a decent cook. When Morpheus sampled the food, she confirmed it was genuinely delicious. Even the agent asked if Jeezer had truly cooked everything himself. He affirmed he had, then inquired if something had happened between the two of them since they had taken so long to return. They recounted the events, and Jeezer was even more astonished that they had received such a generous reward for saving the elderly woman. Thanks to a kind old lady, they reached their goal, and Morpheus felt quite proud of herself. though Flame remarked that even if Morpheus were sold for a silver coin, no one would be foolish enough to buy her. Chloe even asked if Jeezer felt scammed, but he laughed, saying it didn't matter. Morpheus was worth every penny. Regardless, Flame ultimately accepted the full payment. Finally, Jeezer purchased Morpheus. He declared he would be the one to change this world and become the Demon Lord. Beyond that, he would explore every corner of this realm. This left all the girls in shock. The agent mentioned she had heard Jeezer wanted to meet the Demon Lord, but she never imagined he would aim to start such a grand rebellion. Still, Morpheus was ecstatic, asking if she could be the one to assist the future Demon Lord. She was so thrilled that she hugged and kissed Jeezer, leaving the other two girls in disbelief. Orpheus proclaimed that with her help she would do anything, but Flame interrupted, stating it was utterly impossible. Becoming a new Demon Lord was a desperate endeavor due to the presence of Hatsusaki Makazoku. Jeezer pondered the meaning behind that absurdly lengthy name, while Flame clarified they ruled the grand cities of the Gulpi continent. It marked a shift for the four kings serving Mia and her 8 followers. People possessing extraordinary and immensely potent magical powers, they played a significant role in shaping a world where women held sway over men. Flame, a merchant, asserted her knowledge came from her travels across various nations. If Jesus' intentions were revealed, his demise would be imminent. She wasn't aiming to dishearten him, merely cautioning him. The protagonist shifted topics, inquiring about the nearest city, leaving Flame astonished by his apparent indifference. Chloe indicated that the closest location was the Pennsylvania government, making it clear to Flame that the Egypt would join them. Chloe was resolute in her mission to help Jeezer become the new Demon Lord. Her goal was to safeguard Jeezer so Flame needn't fret, causing her to stutter and awkwardly assert she wasn't worried. The protagonist chuckled, suggesting they keep it down. It was late and they could discuss the city tomorrow. With that, Jesus entrusted the situation to Flame since they would be staying there, prompting her to grumble about his disregard for others' convenience. Starting with a new youth departing from Yggdrasil, which included Clough and the others, even launching a healthy delivery service, Jesus had a long day, struggling to recall the last time he felt this fulfilled. He remembered that the shattered bones of love would mend by the following day, signaling a return to normalcy. Perhaps it was finally time for Jesus to bid farewell to Clough for good. That evening, Chloe took a bath to unwind and prepare for the next day. Jeezer rose early, transitioning from an elderly man back to his youthful self, reading Morpheus, who had dozed off in the adjacent room. While tending to his hair, Morpheus inquired about Chloe's whereabouts. The protagonist responded that she had gone back to the palace first, apparently to inform her subordinates before leaving. It seemed she had regained her bone of love overnight and restored her senses. The thought made Jeezer envision Chloe feeling repulsed by the idea of befriending a man. It must have seemed absurd to her. So Jeezer explained to Morpheus that Chloe had her own obligations, and they would part ways. Morpheus felt sad and lonely about separating from the agent. As they exited the room, Jesus confessed he felt similarly, and they soon spotted Flame outside. She questioned if they were genuinely planning to leave now, trying to suppress her annoyance at Morpheus, referring to her as Old Master. The protagonist asked if she had come to bid farewell, and Flame agreed, acknowledging there was nothing she could do to stop them. Jeezer recognized it was true. The world awaited a new Demon Lord. When the moment arrived, he might even seek Flame's assistance again with her merchant expertise. This made her laugh, puzzled by his meaning. So she inquired about the other girl who had been traveling with them. If they abandoned her, she would likely become furious. At that moment, a pair of voices interrupted Flame. 2 women, law enforcers, and fiercely loyal guards approached. They were named Ans and Zwei. Jesus realized these must be the subordinates Chloe had mentioned earlier. Ions immediately recognized him as the man who had charmed their lady, while he was outraged by such boldness, declaring it was enough. He was truly scum. Geyser chuckled, remarking that was a harsh statement. Yet the two continued to grumble, upset that he was accompanied by 2 women. To them, it was a grave offense for women to be near a man, and Flame knew they weren't mistaken. Any man who opposed them or any woman who allied with a man would face imprisonment. To survive, they had to either flee or defeat them. Though Jeezer had intended to lead before it escalated, Eins and Zwei were much quicker, mocking the protagonist for believing he could overcome them with magic. No woman could ever defeat them. But, of course, it took no time for the two to be vanquished. Jeezer simply laughed. They were too slow, while he could do as he pleased. Eins couldn't comprehend when they had lost, but Jesus stepped closer, pointing at a bone protruding from her stomach, threatening to extract the bone and place the girl in an embarrassing predicament. She pleaded with him not to do it. He merely endured her desperate cries for mercy, laughing and contemplating what kind of punishment to impose. Suddenly someone approached. Cloth, her eyes filled with fury. It was a dire situation for Yeezer. He had been caught teasing her subordinates. The two Brills called for their lady's assistance, claiming Yeezer was taking advantage of them, and the protagonist realized he might have to extract her bone again. To his surprise, he couldn't see any bone of love within Clove, even though it should have regenerated. Claude laughed, stating he wouldn't need to resort to that trick again. After all, she had genuinely fallen for Jesus. Everyone was taken aback by this revelation. Even Jesus himself found it hard to believe, but it was the truth. If someone truly fell in love, the bone of love in question would never regenerate, and Cloak informed her subordinates that she was departing the city. The two were incredulous, but their lady confirmed it was indeed her choice. Moreover, Cloth entrusted the city's safety to Ains and Zui, cautioning them that if anything occurred while she was away, they would face punishment. Upon hearing this threat, the two quickly agreed to comply with her orders, and Cloth stated they could leave now. She vowed to follow Jesus wherever he went. This made Jeezer chuckle. The girls around him were truly reliable. Once again, he expressed his gratitude for their support. Morpheus couldn't believe Clough actually admired her master. Clough insisted it was clear she deserved to possess him, even if it meant losing Jesus' favor. Still, Flame waved goodbye to everyone as they left, and the group embarked on their next mission. Their target, the kingdom of Pistolvania, where Hatsuki Makazoku lay in wait.